Have you ever felt like you are living a life that isn't really yours, as if somehow you are following a script written by someone else? Your parents, your teachers, your friends, perhaps even society itself. Deep down, a part of you whispers, sometimes screams, that something is fundamentally wrong. You wake up each day, carefully put on the familiar mask, fulfill your obligations, and interact with people as if everything is perfectly fine. But then, the day ends, silence descends, and that uncomfortable question resurfaces, persistent and unsettling. Who am I, really? Carl Jung believed that this profound sense of disconnection isn't a mere coincidence. On the contrary, it's a critical symptom of a deep-seated problem that few possess the courage to confront. Most people navigate their entire lives without ever truly knowing their authentic selves. They confine themselves to living out prescribed social roles, fabricated identities, and imposed expectations. And the most tragic part, they genuinely believe that this constrained existence is all there is. They pass away without ever having touched the depths of their own soul, without having experienced the exhilarating freedom of being wholly themselves. And now comes the most crucial question. Is this happening to you? What you currently understand as your self, is it genuinely you? Your personality, your desires, your beliefs? How much of this is authentically yours, and how much was unconsciously absorbed or deliberately placed there by others? From the earliest moments of childhood, we are conditioned to fit in, to become acceptable, to suppress certain aspects of ourselves in a relentless pursuit of love and belonging. We instinctively create a mask, or what Jung brilliantly termed a persona, a social disguise we employ to protect ourselves from perceived judgment and vulnerability. However, the more consistently we wear this mask, the further we inevitably drift from our true selves. One day, tragically, this mask can become all that remains, a hollow substitute for the vibrant, authentic individual we were always meant to be. But Jung emphatically warned us, living disconnected from the core of who we truly are comes at a steep price. A price paid with persistent feelings of anguish, profound dissatisfaction, and a nagging, unsettling sense that something essential is perpetually missing. Have you ever experienced the feeling that no matter what you achieve, a deep emptiness persists, as if something vital remains perpetually out of reach? This feeling isn't random. It arises because what you genuinely need isn't out there, waiting to be acquired. It isn't lurking in a better job, in a seemingly perfect relationship, or in the fleeting recognition of others. The answer resides within you, buried beneath countless layers of conditioning, societal expectations, and self-imposed limitations. The paramount question, then, is this: are you willing to bravely dive into the depths of your own psyche and embark on a journey to discover who you truly are? Understand that this journey is not for the faint of heart. It is not a casual stroll. Unearthing your true self necessitates confronting everything that has been repressed, forgotten, or deliberately distorted over the years. It means courageously looking inward and facing those parts of yourself that you might instinctively prefer to avoid. But this arduous process is also the only viable pathway to genuine freedom, to a life lived on your own terms. In this exploration, we will delve into the transformative journey that Carl Jung called individuation, the intricate process of becoming whole, of integrating all the disparate parts of yourself, both the celebrated and the feared, and finally, living in alignment with your truest essence. Are you ready to embark on this profound adventure? Then, let's begin. From childhood, you implicitly learned that to be accepted, valued, and loved, you needed to behave in certain prescribed ways. Perhaps you were meticulously taught to be excessively polite, to avoid speaking too loudly or expressing strong opinions, to diligently suppress anger, to always prioritize pleasing others above your own needs. Or maybe you internalized the belief that you constantly had to be strong, relentlessly hide any perceived weaknesses, and project an unwavering confidence even when you were secretly plagued by doubts and anxieties. Unbeknownst to you at the time, you unwittingly began to meticulously shape an identity that wasn't inherently your own, but rather a carefully constructed reflection of what you perceived the world expected of you. Carl Jung aptly named this carefully constructed facade the persona. It is the face you consciously present to the external world, the version of yourself that you painstakingly crafted to fit in, to gain approval, and to navigate the complexities of social interaction. And don't be misled. We all possess a persona to varying degrees. If you have ever consciously acted differently at work compared to how you behave at home, or modified your interactions with friends versus family, or even curated a specific image of yourself on social media platforms, then you have already experienced the pervasive power of the persona in your daily life. Is the persona inherently useful? Yes, undoubtedly. Without it, we would likely struggle to effectively relate to others socially, to navigate the nuanced rules of social engagement. However, there exists a significant danger. When you begin to completely identify with this painstakingly crafted mask, you gradually start to forget who you truly are beneath the surface. Pause for a moment and genuinely reflect. How many times have you consciously said or done something primarily to gain acceptance or avoid conflict? How many times have you deliberately concealed your true thoughts and feelings out of an underlying fear of judgment or ridicule? How many times have you caught yourself forcing a smile when, deep inside, you desperately wanted to scream or express your authentic emotions? This occurs because, at some point along the way, the persona ceases to be merely a role you play and begins to relentlessly dominate your very existence. You are no longer operating as an authentic individual expressing your true self, but rather as a character mechanically playing a role that you didn't even consciously choose for yourself. And herein lies the crux of the problem. The persona, no matter how polished, cannot sustain your soul. It can undoubtedly bring you temporary acceptance, but it cannot provide lasting fulfillment. It can guarantee you fleeting compliments, but it cannot deliver genuine, enduring happiness. In the long run, living solely through the filter of the persona inevitably leads to a feeling of profound emptiness, where you sense that something essential is missing from your life, yet you struggle to clearly identify what it is. And perhaps even more concerning, the more tightly you cling to this carefully constructed mask, the further you inevitably drift from your true essence, from the authentic individual you were always meant to be. But if the persona is not your true self, then who are you really? To even begin to answer this profound question, we need to turn our attention to the other side of the coin, to the often hidden part of you that has been consistently repressed, ignored, and pushed deep into the unconscious. Jung poignantly named this the shadow, and it is within the exploration of this often feared realm that the true quest for your authentic self truly begins. However, be forewarned. What lies hidden within the depths of your shadow is not always easy or even comfortable to face. Are you genuinely ready to discover the contents of this hidden chamber within your own psyche? Then, continue with me on this revealing journey. If this content is resonating with you and you are finding value in exploring these profound concepts, consider subscribing to this channel and joining our community of individuals dedicated to self-discovery and personal growth. Thank you for your support. It allows us to continue creating content that illuminates the path to greater self-understanding. If the persona is the carefully constructed mask you wear in order to be accepted by the outside world, then the shadow encompasses everything you actively hide, repress, and deny in order to avoid being rejected, judged, or ostracized. But here's the core problem. What you repress doesn't simply vanish into thin air. On the contrary, it often gains strength in the depths of your unconscious mind, operating in the shadows of your awareness, subtly and powerfully influencing your emotions, your fears, and even the apparently conscious choices you make in your life, often without you even realizing it. Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden, often disavowed side of the psyche, composed of everything that has been actively repressed throughout your lifetime. Prohibited desires, unexpressed anger, perceived weaknesses you don't want to admit to possessing, traumatic experiences you have tried desperately to forget. And you know what's often worse? Many of the elements contained within your shadow aren't inherently bad or inherently destructive. They are simply parts of you that, at some point in your life, someone, a parent, a teacher, a peer, or even society at large, deemed unacceptable, inappropriate, or unworthy of expression. Perhaps, as a young child, you exhibited an insatiable curiosity, constantly asking questions and exploring your surroundings, but were labeled inconvenient or disruptive, and learned to suppress your natural inquisitiveness and remain quiet. Maybe you instinctively felt the urge to express anger or frustration when you felt wronged, but were taught that such emotions were wrong or unladylike. And now you habitually swallow your frustrations until they eventually explode in unhealthy ways. Perhaps you displayed a natural sensitivity and empathy towards others, but society convinced you that such qualities were signs of weakness, so you consciously learned to hide your feelings and project an image of stoicism. All of this, all the vital parts of you that were consistently denied, suppressed, and invalidated, did not simply disappear. They retreated into the depths of your shadow, waiting, sometimes for decades, for the opportune moment to emerge and demand recognition. And they inevitably do emerge, often in unexpected and disruptive ways. If you've ever experienced an unexpected outburst of anger that seemed disproportionate to the situation and later regretted your reaction, felt pangs of envy or resentment towards someone, and then attempted to deny those feelings to yourself, or reacted excessively to seemingly minor criticism without fully understanding why, then you have likely experienced the potent influence of your shadow taking control of your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. When we don't consciously acknowledge, explore, and integrate the contents of our shadow, it tends to manifest in distorted, often self-sabotaging ways, damaging our relationships, hindering our careers, and eroding our self-esteem. But here's the crucial truth that too few people understand. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is not something to be feared or relentlessly suppressed. On the contrary, it is within your shadow that many of the most valuable, authentic, and potentially transformative aspects of your personality lie dormant. Your untapped creativity, your genuine authenticity, your inherent inner strength. You simply cannot become truly whole, truly integrated, and truly self-actualized until you courageously integrate these disavowed parts of yourself. And to accomplish that essential task, you need to actively stop running away from your shadow and begin looking inward with honesty, compassion, and a willingness to confront potentially uncomfortable truths. But how do you effectively face something that has been consistently repressed and avoided for so long? How do you bring the contents of your shadow into the light of conscious awareness without allowing it to overwhelm or consume you? The answer lies in a central concept of Jungian psychology, the self, or the true self, and that is precisely what we are going to explore next. If the persona is the carefully constructed mask, and the shadow is the repository of everything you have consciously repressed, then the self, the true self, is the unifying force that exists beyond these superficial layers. It is the totality of your psyche, the harmonious integration between who you truly are at your core and the persona you choose to present to the world. Jung passionately believed that the ultimate purpose of life was not simply to passively follow a path that has been predefined by societal norms and expectations, but rather to actively strive to become whole, to embark on a journey to discover your authentic essence, and to live in accordance with the dictates of that true self. This lifelong process of self-discovery, integration, and alignment is what he so eloquently called individuation. But finding the self is not something that happens by chance or through passive waiting. It is not an accidental discovery, nor is it something that simply appears one day out of thin air, like a magical epiphany. The self does not readily reveal itself to those who are unwilling to bravely face the truth about themselves, to confront their own limitations, and to embrace their imperfections. You must actively seek it out with intention, courage, and unwavering commitment. And this essential quest necessitates a deep and often challenging journey within the depths of your own psyche. It is a confrontation with everything you have been taught to hide or suppress, a delicate reconciliation between your most authentic desires and the often conflicting restrictions imposed by the external world. The greatest obstacle to finding the true self is undoubtedly fear. Fear of losing the familiar identity you have meticulously built over the years. Fear of realizing that many of your choices were not truly your own, but were rather dictated by external pressures. Fear of facing long repressed aspects of your personality that you have actively denied for so long. This pervasive fear is precisely what prevents so many people from ever finding their self. They spend their entire lives clinging desperately to their carefully constructed persona, pretending to be something they are not, while their shadow operates relentlessly behind the scenes, subtly sabotaging their chances of experiencing genuine happiness, fulfillment, and authentic connection. But when you begin to courageously integrate the contents of your shadow and question the validity of the masks you wear, something truly incredible happens. You start to experience a sense of freedom you have never known before. You discover that you no longer feel the compelling need to pretend to be someone you are not, to constantly curate your image for the approval of others. You realize that you no longer need to compulsively please everyone around you, sacrificing your own needs and desires in the process. You begin to act more authentically, to make decisions that resonate deeply with your values, and not just to meet the often unrealistic expectations of others. And the most fascinating part of this journey is that the closer you get to aligning with your true self, the more your life begins to make sense on a profound level. The anxieties and frustrations that once seemed inexplicable begin to have a clear and discernible root. You understand why certain patterns repeat themselves in your relationships, why certain situations trigger such intense emotional responses, why certain relationships consistently fail to provide you with lasting satisfaction. You start to realize that throughout your entire life, there was something vital inside you, a guiding voice, attempting to show you the way towards greater authenticity and fulfillment. But you were simply too preoccupied with trying to fit in, to seek external validation, to truly listen to its quiet, persistent wisdom. But there is one particularly important detail to keep in mind. The path to finding the self cannot be effectively walked in isolation. There is a fundamental element in this journey that many individuals mistakenly ignore: the immense power of the unconscious mind and the archetypes that subtly shape the way we think, feel, and behave on a profound level. If you fail to understand the potent influence of these hidden forces, you will never be able to fully comprehend who you are, what motivates you, and what consistently prevents you from achieving lasting happiness and fulfillment. And that is precisely what we will explore next. The human mind is far more than just what we consciously perceive, think about, and rationally understand. The vast majority of our psyche remains hidden from conscious awareness, operating at a deep, invisible level. Jung believed that to truly find the self, it is not enough to simply examine our rational thoughts and deliberate decisions. We must be willing to courageously dive into the depths of the unconscious, for it is there that the hidden patterns and primordial images that fundamentally shape our identity are to be found. But what exactly resides within this mysterious realm of the unconscious? Beyond your personal shadow, beyond repressed memories and unrecognized desires, there exists something even more fundamental: universal archetypes. Jung discovered that the human psyche is not, as some previously believed, a blank slate. On the contrary, we are all born with innate, universal mental structures, pre-existing patterns of thought, behavior, and emotion that are shared by all people, regardless of their specific culture, geographical location, or historical time period. He poignantly called this shared reservoir of unconscious content the collective unconscious, and it is from this vast collective unconscious that archetypes emerge, primordial images, symbols, and narratives that subtly and powerfully influence the way we perceive the world and our place within it. If you have ever felt an inexplicable attraction to certain stories, myths, or symbols, it is because archetypes are actively at work within you, resonating with these ancient universal patterns. They frequently appear in fairy tales, in classic movies, in religious doctrines, and most importantly, in your own personal dreams and characteristic behaviors. For example, the hero is a prominent archetype present in virtually all cultures throughout history. It represents the individual who bravely faces challenges, overcomes seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and ultimately undergoes a profound personal transformation. But there is also the wise old man or woman who symbolizes wisdom, knowledge, and introspection. The rebel, who fearlessly challenges the established rules and questions the prevailing system, and the caregiver, who is driven by a deep-seated desire to protect and serve others. And the most intriguing aspect is that you do not consciously choose which archetypes exert the greatest influence over your life. They operate largely outside of your conscious awareness, subtly shaping your desires, your fears, and your habitual ways of relating to the world. The problem arises when you become overly identified with only one particular archetype and rigidly ignore the potential value and perspectives of the others. If you primarily see yourself as the hero, you may end up feeling pressured to always be strong, resilient, and in control, finding it extremely difficult to accept your own inherent weaknesses or vulnerabilities. If you exclusively live in the role of the caregiver, you may spend your entire life relentlessly putting the needs of others above your own, completely neglecting your own well-being and losing sight of your own dreams and aspirations. Finding the true self ultimately means achieving a delicate balance between these archetypes, conscientiously recognizing which ones currently dominate your life and actively integrating those that have been unduly neglected or suppressed. But how do these archetypes manifest in your daily life? The answer often lies in paying close attention to your dreams, to your impulsive reactions, and to the patterns that consistently repeat themselves in your relationships and choices, often without you consciously understanding why. And if you consistently ignore these subtle clues, you will inevitably be ignoring essential parts of yourself, hindering your progress towards self-discovery and authentic living. That is why so many people feel perpetually lost, confused, and unfulfilled. They do not understand that there are powerful, invisible forces subtly shaping their desires, their decisions, and even their recurring existential crises. But here is the most critical question. If you do not become consciously aware of these archetypes and their influence on your life, they will inevitably control you, dictating your behaviors, exacerbating your insecurities, and influencing the dynamics of your relationships. However, if you diligently recognize and actively integrate them into your conscious awareness, you can effectively take control of your own narrative, aligning your choices with your deepest values and consciously shaping the trajectory of your life. And that is precisely what differentiates those who successfully find their true self from those who spend their entire lives trapped in unconscious patterns, blindly reacting to forces they do not understand. But what if you choose to ignore all of this? What happens to someone who consciously refuses to look at the contents of their unconscious mind, who actively resists the process of individuation and continues to live according to societal expectations, carefully constructed masks, and self-imposed illusions? The answer lies in the pervasive psychological suffering that inevitably accompanies those who consciously flee from themselves, avoiding the essential task of self-discovery. And that is the inherent danger of non-individuation, which we will now explore in greater detail. What ultimately happens to someone who spends their entire life running away from themselves, who diligently ignores their own shadow, lives perpetually imprisoned within a carefully crafted persona, and steadfastly refuses to acknowledge the powerful archetypes that subtly shape their destiny? Carl Jung was unequivocally clear. Avoiding the challenging process of individuation does not keep us safe, protected, or immune from suffering. Instead, It condemns us to a fragmented, inauthentic existence filled with persistent anxiety, underlying frustration, and a gnawing emptiness that can never be truly filled by anything external, no matter how appealing it may initially appear. Many people erroneously believe that rigidly following society's prescribed rules and diligently fitting into what is expected of them will somehow guarantee a peaceful, predictable, and ultimately fulfilling life. But this perceived tranquility is merely superficial, a carefully constructed illusion that inevitably crumbles under the weight of its own inherent falseness. At some point, often unexpectedly, something begins to go wrong, disrupting the carefully maintained facade. This disruption may manifest as an unexpected emotional crisis, seemingly without any apparent explanation, persistent feelings of profound dissatisfaction, and a lack of purpose even when everything appears perfect on the surface, or the emergence of chronic psychosomatic illnesses that stubbornly resist conventional medical treatment. The body and the mind, working in close and constant communication, will always find creative ways to alert us when we are straying too far from our true nature, when we are living in misalignment with our authentic self. Non-individuation can also manifest through destructive and self-sabotaging patterns. Have you ever noticed how some individuals seem to consistently repeat the same mistakes throughout their lives? How they repeatedly enter into abusive relationships, subtly sabotage their own professional achievements, or live in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction, no matter how much they seemingly accomplish. This occurs because when we consciously avoid dealing with the hidden contents of our unconscious mind, we inevitably become prisoners of our own repressed emotions, unresolved traumas, and unexamined beliefs. Our unconscious mind then finds indirect, often destructive ways to express itself, even if it is primarily through chronic suffering and a persistent sense of unease. Another common symptom of non-individuation is the pervasive feeling that we are merely existing, passively going through the motions of daily life, but not truly living with intention, passion, and purpose. This often manifests in a monotonous, unfulfilling routine, in a life devoid of genuine purpose, in a disturbing sense that we are simply going with the flow, passively reacting to external circumstances, without a clear personal direction or a compelling vision for the future. This is the unfortunate reality for millions of people who have never taken the time to consciously question whether the life they are currently leading is truly the life they consciously chose, or whether it is merely a reflection of inherited patterns, imposed beliefs, and the unexamined expectations of others. And perhaps most dangerous of all is the insidious emotion of resentment. When a person actively ignores who they truly are at their core, they inevitably feel underlying anger, frustration, and a deep-seated sense of injustice. But they do not always consciously understand where that anger is originating from. They may turn against others, unfairly blaming the world, the political system, their family members, or society at large for their own persistent suffering. Or they may tragically turn inward, directing their suppressed anger against themselves, ultimately transforming it into debilitating depression, self-sabotaging behaviors, and a profound disconnection from their own existence. But there is always a way out. There is always a viable path to break free from this destructive cycle and liberate oneself from this invisible prison of self-imposed limitations. The answer lies in cultivating the courage to bravely face the truth, to consciously question one's own deeply held illusions, and to actively seek the challenging process of individuation. This process is undoubtedly not easy, and it requires sustained effort, unwavering determination, and the willingness to look within oneself, even when what we find is not pleasant, comforting, or immediately gratifying. And now we arrive at the crucial point. What does it practically mean to be yourself? What does it truly look like to live without constantly hiding behind carefully constructed masks, without rigidly repressing certain aspects of your personality, without living in perpetual fear of external judgment? What ultimately happens when you successfully find, embrace, and embody your authentic self? Let's explore this in our conclusion. Finding your true self is not a fixed destination to be reached, but rather an ongoing process of continuous exploration, self-reflection, and conscious evolution. It is not something that happens overnight, as if one day you simply wake up and suddenly know exactly who you are, what your purpose is, and how to flawlessly navigate every challenge that life presents. Instead, it is a lifelong journey, a path of continual discoveries, deconstruction of limiting beliefs, and reconstruction of a more authentic identity, persistently facing the shadows within and consciously freeing yourself from the masks that have been unconsciously imposed upon you by external forces. And it is a path that, sadly, relatively few choose to consciously walk. Most people passively prefer the perceived safety of conformity, diligently adhering to societal norms and unquestioningly following the well-worn path of least resistance. They desperately cling to their carefully constructed personas because they erroneously believe that without them, they would be immediately rejected, ostracized, or deemed unworthy of love and belonging. They deliberately avoid looking directly at the hidden contents of their shadow because they irrationally fear what they might find lurking within those dark, unexplored corners of their psyche. They unknowingly ignore the subtle influence of the powerful archetypes that consistently guide their lives because they do not want to admit that they are not as fully in control of their own destiny as they would ideally like to believe. But this pervasive fear comes at a steep cost, an inauthentic, unsatisfying existence, lacking in genuine meaning, depth, and authentic connection. Jung so wisely showed us that true freedom ultimately lies not in blindly fitting in with external expectations, but in courageously becoming who we were always truly meant to be at our core. This means fearlessly accepting your inherent wholeness, both your perceived qualities and your perceived flaws, both your illuminating light and your inevitable darkness. It means taking conscious control of your own life, rather than remaining merely a passive product of your surrounding environment, your cultural conditioning, and the often unrealistic expectations of others. It means consciously abandoning the role of a puppet, passively manipulated by external forces, and actively becoming the author of your own unique, meaningful story. But this path undeniably requires unwavering courage to consciously let go of the familiar illusions that have provided you with a false sense of comfort for so long, to bravely face your own deepest fears, persistent insecurities, and long-held anxieties, to accept the unsettling possibility that you may not be who you previously thought you were, and to embrace the empowering realization that that's okay. Because now you have the unprecedented opportunity to intentionally become someone so much greater, so much more authentic, and so much more vibrantly alive than you ever previously imagined. So, I ask you now, Are you ready to accept this profound challenge? Are you willing to consciously question the stories you have been told about who you are, to courageously confront the long repressed parts of yourself that have been hidden away in the shadows, to finally live in conscious alignment with your true essence, your most authentic self? If something in this exploration resonated deeply with you, I encourage you to let me know in the comments which specific aspect impacted you the most. Have you ever experienced the unsettling feeling that you were living an identity that wasn't genuinely yours? Let's openly discuss it, share our insights, and support one another on this challenging, yet ultimately rewarding journey of self-discovery. And don't stop here. The next exploration is essential to deepen this journey and understand even more about the hidden mechanisms that shape your mind. So, keep watching and keep questioning, because this transformative discovery is just the beginning. So, to wrap it all up, this journey we've explored together, this deep dive into Jungian psychology, it's really about reclaiming ownership of your life. It's about shedding those borrowed masks, embracing the hidden parts of yourself, and courageously stepping into the person you were always meant to be. It's about finding that sweet spot of conscious living where your inner compass aligns perfectly with your outer actions. We've touched on concepts that influence everything from your daily productivity mindset to your deepest sense of self. If any of this resonated with you, if something sparked a new thought or challenged an old belief, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Leave a comment below. What part of the persona, the shadow, or the archetype discussion really clicked for you? Do you have any questions about how you can apply these concepts to your own life? Or maybe even how trauma recovery science or elements of AI philosophy of self are related? Let's create a space where we can learn and grow together. And if you're committed to deepening your cognitive clarity and building those essential mental health tools, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got so much more neuroscience content and exploration of self-optimization planned. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos that can empower you on your journey of self-discovery. Let's keep questioning, keep learning, and keep evolving together. See you in the next video.